One evening, Aunt Ngozi called Amaka into the parlor. Her voice was sharp, her eyes cold. "You are of age," she said. "I cannot keep feeding a grown girl who is not my child. That wheelbarrow boy wants to marry you. It is settled." Amaka's heart sank. Evelyn smirked from the corner, enjoying her cousin's misery. Amaka protested weakly, but her words fell on deaf ears. Sit tight, and this interesting story, don't forget to subscribe. Amaka's life began with laughter, but it did not stay that way. As a little girl, she remembered her father's gentle voice and her mother's soft songs that carried her to sleep. Their small rented flat was poor but filled with love, the kind that made a child believe the world was beautiful. That joy was cut short when sickness swept through her family. Within months, both parents were gone, leaving Amaka with nothing but memories and tears. At the graveside, she stood with trembling hands, staring into the earth that swallowed her entire world. Childhood ended that day. After the funeral, the crowd of relatives returned to their own lives. People whispered pity but carried on. Amaka, still a child, was taken by her mother's elder sister, Aunt Ngozi, to Lagos. She thought she was being rescued, but she soon discovered it was another kind of prison. Aunt Ngozi welcomed her with cold eyes, and from the first night, Amaka realized she had become more servant than daughter. "This is not your father's house," her aunt said sharply. "Here, you must learn to be useful." The words pressed into Amaka's young heart like heavy stones. Life in Aunt Ngozi's household was full of rules, but those rules applied only to Amaka. Evelyn, the only daughter of the house, was the queen. She was the same age as Amaka, yet she lived in complete comfort. Evelyn slept in a decorated room with a fan, while Amaka lay on a thin mat in the corner of the kitchen, close to smoke and heat. Evelyn had polished shoes, neat uniforms, and extra lessons. Amaka wore torn dresses and washed her clothes by hand until her fingers cracked. Every day, the difference reminded Amaka that she was unwanted. From the very first week, Amaka's hands became rough with work. She fetched water before sunrise, carried firewood, scrubbed floors, and washed clothes that were not hers. Her aunt's voice always chased her from one task to another. "Amaka, go to the market. Amaka, sweep the compound. Amaka, pound yam before my husband returns." She barely had time to rest. Whenever she slowed down, Evelyn mocked her, saying, "Why are you so lazy? Even as a servant you are not good enough." Those words burned. Amaka swallowed her pain in silence, knowing there was nowhere else to run. The market became her second home because her aunt constantly sent her on errands. She carried heavy baskets of pepper, onions, and tomatoes, weaving through the crowd while sweat ran down her face. The air was filled with shouts of traders calling prices, the smell of fish mixed with spice, and the noise of bargaining voices. In the middle of that chaos, one person always noticed her, Chike, the wheelbarrow pusher. His clothes were old, his slippers worn thin, and sweat always stained his shirt. But he greeted her with a warm smile. "Good afternoon, sister," he would say kindly. Chike was different from the other boys in the market. Many of them teased her, mocking her faded dress and her tired look. Some laughed when her basket tilted, spilling pepper on the ground. But Chike was never unkind. Whenever he saw her struggling, he quickly pushed his wheelbarrow closer and offered to carry her load. "Let me help you," he said, his tone gentle. Amaka would hesitate, knowing she had little money, but he would reassure her with a nod. "Don't worry. Pay me later." That kindness became a light in her dark routine of suffering. At home, Evelyn made sure Amaka never forgot her place. She was cruel, copying her mother's arrogance. While Amaka scrubbed the floor, Evelyn would sit in the parlor, stretching her legs and eating snacks. "Look at you," she sneered, "always smelling of sweat and smoke. You will never be like me. Who will marry a dirty house girl like you?" Her mother never corrected her. Instead, Aunt Ngozi added more insults. "Your mother left you for me, but you behave like you are doing me a favor. If you don't like this house, go and join her in the grave." Those words became scars in Amaka's memory. At night, when she lay on her thin mat, tears would flow silently. The kitchen smelled of kerosene and smoke, but that corner was her only space. She remembered her mother's voice, soft and encouraging, saying, "Endure, my child. Life is not always smooth, but the sun will rise after the rain." Amaka repeated those words to herself like a prayer. They gave her strength when her arms ached from carrying buckets or her heart ached from Evelyn's insults. They reminded her that pain was not forever, even if today was hard. School was another battlefield. While Evelyn wore new uniforms and carried a shiny school bag, Amaka's uniform was faded and sometimes patched at the elbows. She walked barefoot sometimes, her sandals worn down until they barely held together. Other children noticed. They laughed at her, calling her house girl. Some even avoided sitting with her. But Amaka loved learning, and she refused to let shame keep her away from books. At night, after chores, she studied by lantern light. She read every page with determination, believing education was her hidden weapon, the key that might one day unlock a better life. In the market, people gossiped about Chaik. "That boy will die poor," one trader said. "His family has nothing." Another added, "He is wasting his life pushing wheelbarrows. Even his clothes are disgraceful." Some mock him openly, laughing when his slippers broke in the mud. But Amaka saw something different. She saw his patience when others quarreled, his humility when others boasted, and his honesty when others cheated. He never fought over money or insulted customers. He worked hard, sweating under the sun, yet always carried himself with quiet dignity. Amaka respected him, even if the world did not. Whenever Evelyn heard Amaka mention Chaik, she reacted with disgust. "That wheelbarrow boy," she scoffed. "He is beneath us. If you keep talking to him, people will think you are like him, poor and useless." Amaka kept quiet. She knew Evelyn measured people by clothes, money, and position. But Amaka had learned the hard way that those things could disappear. Her parents once had stability, but death swept it all away. What mattered was kindness, not wealth. And Chaik, though poor, had a heart richer than anyone she knew. That was why she always greeted him with respect. Over time, Amaka and Chaik's paths crossed more frequently. She began to expect his presence at the market. He was always there, ready to help her carry bags of rice, baskets of vegetables, or heavy yam flour. Their conversations were short, but meaningful. "Be careful, sister," he said whenever she stumbled. "Thank you," she replied softly. It was never more than that, but in those small exchanges, Amaka found comfort. He reminded her that not everyone in the world was cruel. In a life filled with insults, his kindness was like rain falling on dry ground. One evening, Amaka carried a basket too heavy for her arms. The road was muddy, and her steps slipped dangerously. Traders laughed, calling her weak girl. Just then, Chaik appeared. He rushed forward, lifted the basket, and placed it on his wheelbarrow. "Don't hurt yourself," he said gently. Amaka looked up, surprised by his concern. It was such a small act, yet her heart warmed. No one else cared if she stumbled. But Chaik did. That night, as she lay in the smoky kitchen, she remembered his words. For the first time in a long while, she smiled before sleeping. Still, life at home did not change. Auntie Ngozi remained harsh, Evelyn remained cruel, and the chores never ended. But Amaka endured, holding tightly to her mother's words and to the tiny light of kindness she found in the market. She did not know what the future held. She only knew she must survive one day at a time. Her heart carried both pain and hope, like a basket too full. She did not yet realize that destiny was already watching her steps, weaving her path with Chaik's. The wheelbarrow pusher would one day change her story forever. Section 2. The Forced Marriage. The day began like every other, with Amaka sweeping the compound under the morning sun. She thought it would be another normal day of errands and insults, but her aunt's sharp voice soon called her into the parlor. Auntie Ngozi's face was set in stone, her arms folded as she looked at Amaka from head to toe. "You are no longer a child," she said coldly. "I cannot keep feeding you for free. It is time you become another man's responsibility." Amaka froze, her broom slipping from her hand. Her heart raced, but she knew arguing would be useless. Evelyn was seated on the sofa, chewing groundnuts with a sly smile. She already knew what her mother planned, and her eyes sparkled with mockery. "Yes, Mama," she said. "Amaka is now of age. But who will even want her? Nobody wants a house girl." Her laughter filled the room like poison. Amaka stood silent, her palms sweating. She felt as though a heavy chain was being wrapped around her neck. She wanted to speak, to plead, but fear silenced her tongue. Auntie Ngozi continued without pity. "There is one man who has asked for your hand. Chaik." Amaka's heart almost stopped. Chike. The wheelbarrow pusher from the market? The boy who carried loads for her with a kind smile? She respected him, but marriage? Her aunt's eyes pierced her. Do not look shocked, she snapped. He is poor, yes, but at least he wants you. Nobody else will. You should be grateful. Evelyn clapped her hands, laughing. Oh, how fitting. Our house girl will marry a market boy. What a perfect match. Amaka felt tears rising, but she swallowed them quickly. She had been trained by pain to hide her emotions. Still, inside, her heart broke. That night, as she lay on her mat, Amaka cried silently. She thought of her mother's words, "Endure, my child." But this endurance felt too heavy. She had always respected Chike, but marriage was a lifelong bond. She was not ready. She had dreams, faint ones, of finishing school, maybe becoming a teacher one day. But now, those dreams seemed to dissolve like smoke in the air. She imagined herself in the market forever, tied to a wheelbarrow pusher, mocked by Evelyn and laughed at by neighbors. Her tears fell until the mat beneath her head grew wet. Within weeks, the marriage was arranged. There was no joy, no music, no celebration. Aunt Ngozi made it clear, "I will not waste money on you. You are lucky he even agreed to marry you." A small gathering was held, with only a few neighbors attending. Some whispered among themselves, shaking their heads at the sight of Amaka in a plain dress and Chike in his worn shirt. "This is what happens when an orphan overstays in another person's house," one woman muttered. Evelyn smirked all through, enjoying the humiliation. Amaka kept her head bowed, praying for strength. When the vows were spoken, Amaka's voice trembled. Her hands shook as she placed them in Chike's callous palms. He looked at her with quiet eyes, not mocking, not gloating, but simply calm. Perhaps he understood her fear. Perhaps he carried his own. After the simple ceremony, they walked back to his small one-room apartment at the edge of the market. The walls were cracked, the roof leaked, and the bed was only a thin mattress on the floor. Amaka sat quietly, her heart heavy. This was her new life, chosen for her, not by her. She felt trapped. But Chike surprised her. From the very first day, he treated her with tenderness. He never raised his voice, never mocked her, never demanded more than she could give. He shared his small meals with her, even when there was little. Sometimes, after a long day of pushing wheelbarrows under the hot sun, he would return with roasted corn or groundnuts and place them gently in her hand. "Eat first," he would say softly. Amaka blinked at him, unused to such kindness. She had expected harshness, but instead she found quiet care. Slowly, her heart began to soften. Still, the poverty was heavy. They lived with very little. Rain leaked through the roof, and sometimes they went to bed hungry. Amaka often cried at night, not because of Chike's behavior, but because she feared she had no future. She thought of Evelyn, sitting in comfort, mocking her. She thought of her classmates, some of whom would finish school while she carried buckets of water. Yet, whenever despair rose, Chike's presence reminded her that not all was lost. He was poor, yes, but he was good. His hands were rough, but his heart was gentle. Evelyn wasted no time in spreading the news. "At every corner," she boasted, "my cousin has married a wheelbarrow pusher. Imagine! While I will marry a rich man one day, she will remain in the market, sweating beside her poor husband." Aunt Ngozi joined in, saying, "She should thank me. Without me, she would be sleeping on the streets. At least now she has a roof, even if it leaks." They laughed together, satisfied with Amaka's fate. They did not know that destiny was preparing a lesson for them, one they would remember forever. Their laughter would not last. As days turned into weeks, Amaka discovered something important. Life with Chike was hard, but it was not cruel. He did not treat her like a slave. He washed his own clothes, cooked when she was tired, and listened when she spoke. When she cried quietly at night, he would not mock her. Instead, he would say gently, "Don't cry. Tomorrow will be better." These words, though simple, healed wounds deeper than he could see. For the first time since her parents' death, Amaka began to feel what it meant to be valued, even in poverty. The market women noticed the difference too. "Your husband is a good man," one of them said to Amaka one day. "He does not fight, he does not drink, he does not waste money." Amaka smiled faintly, though she carried heavy loads in her arms. She had never imagined herself married so young, but she could not deny that Chike's gentleness softened the burden. Some of the women whispered, "Better to marry a poor kind man than a rich wicked one." Amaka thought deeply about this. Perhaps God had hidden blessings in this marriage, blessings she had not yet seen. At night, Amaka sometimes dreamed of her parents. In her dream, her mother would smile at her and say, "Do not be afraid, my daughter. This is not the end." She would wake with tears on her face, but her heart felt lighter. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe this forced marriage was not the punishment her aunt thought it was. Maybe it was the beginning of something greater. She did not know how, but she held on to that hope. Life had taught her to endure, and perhaps endurance would soon open a door she could not yet see. As weeks turned to months, Amaka's life with Chike settled into a rhythm. Every morning, he pushed his wheelbarrow to the market while she cleaned their little room, fetched water, and prepared simple meals. They had very little, sometimes only Gary soaked in water for dinner, but they shared it with gratitude. Though her stomach often felt empty, her heart slowly grew full. For the first time since childhood, Amaka felt safe in someone's presence. Chike never raised his hand, never called her names, never compared her to anyone. His respect was a gift greater than riches. Back at her aunt's house, things were different. Evelyn's pride only grew. Whenever Amaka visited to drop off small food items as tradition required, Evelyn laughed openly. "See the wife of a wheelbarrow man. Look at your dress, so faded. Look at your shoes, torn. Your husband must be starving you." Her mother added, "You should kneel down and thank me every day for forcing you into marriage. Without me, you would be begging on the street." Their voices cut Amaka like knives, but she endured. Deep in her heart, she whispered to herself, "Time will speak." Life with Chike was still difficult. His wheelbarrow broke sometimes, forcing him to borrow another until he saved enough to repair it. Rain often soaked him to the skin, and he returned home shivering. Amaka would heat water, wipe his back with a cloth, and serve him warm food. He always looked at her with gratitude, saying softly, "Thank you, my wife." Those words melted her heart. She was not treated as a burden in his house. She was not a slave. She was a partner. Slowly, Amaka began to realize she had more dignity in poverty than in wealth. Chike, though poor, had habits that surprised Amaka. He kept a small notebook, where he wrote things each night. At first, she thought it was just accounts of the day's earnings. But sometimes, when she peeped, she saw names of big companies, figures that looked like millions, and sketches of buildings. It confused her. Why would a wheelbarrow pusher write about such things? She wondered. She wanted to ask, but she kept quiet. He had his secrets, and she respected them. Still, a small seed of curiosity began to grow in her heart. Something about Chike was different. One day at the market, Amaka noticed a group of men in suits standing at a distance, watching Chike as he worked. They looked out of place among the traders and hawkers. When she turned her head again, they had vanished. She thought it was her imagination, but a week later, she saw another man in a neat shirt greeting Chike with unusual respect. "Good afternoon, sir," the man said, almost bowing. Chike quickly brushed him off, whispering for silence. Amaka was puzzled. Why would anyone call a wheelbarrow pusher, sir? She carried the question quietly in her heart. At night, when they sat outside under the stars, Chike sometimes stared at the sky for long hours, lost in thought. Amaka would watch him silently, wondering what weighed on his mind. Once, she asked, "Are you unhappy?" He turned to her with a small smile. "No, my wife. I am only waiting for the right time." The words were strange, but his calmness soothed her. She did not press further. Still, she wondered what right time he was speaking of. It felt as though there was a hidden door in his life, one she was not yet allowed to open. Meanwhile, Evelyn's mocking grew sharper. Whenever she saw Amaka in the market, she made a show of turning up her nose. She would point at Chike and laugh loudly, saying, "Look at your husband, sweating like a goat. This is what you call a man. My own husband will drive a big car and wear Italian shoes." Traders nearby chuckled, but some shook their heads. They had seen enough of Chike's behavior to know he was no ordinary boy. Amaka stayed quiet, carrying her goods with dignity. Inside, she whispered to herself again, "Time will speak. One day." Amaka's patience did not go unnoticed. Market women often told her, "You are a good wife. You respect your husband even though he is poor. God will reward you. Their words gave her strength. Chaik also noticed her sacrifices. One evening, he said, I know life is hard now, but I promise you, it will not always be this way. I will never forget how you stand by me. His eyes shone with sincerity. Amaka's heart stirred with hope. She did not understand his meaning fully, but something in his voice told her he carried secrets greater than poverty. Months passed, and though Amaka did not live in wealth, she began to experience peace. The small room they shared became warmer than the big house she once lived in with her aunt. For the first time in years, she felt loved, respected, and valued. Poverty was heavy, but cruelty was heavier, and she had been freed from that. Sometimes, when Evelyn's insults echoed in her mind, she reminded herself, at least here, I am not treated like a slave. She was beginning to learn that true wealth was not measured in money, but in kindness and dignity. One afternoon, a strange event confirmed her suspicions. Chaik returned home earlier than usual, but this time he was dressed differently. His shirt was neat, his trousers well pressed, and his shoes polished. He carried a small briefcase in his hand. Amaka blinked in shock. Where did you get these clothes? She asked softly. He smiled faintly and replied, There are things about me you will understand soon. He said no more, but her curiosity burned stronger. Who was this man she had been forced to marry? Why did he sometimes look more like a rich man hiding in plain sight? Evelyn's world, however, remained the same. She continued to boast of marrying a rich suitor, but none came. Men noticed her beauty, but they also noticed her pride. Pride pushed them away. Auntie Ngozi continued to complain about money, her once stable business now struggling. They whispered angrily in their home about how life was unfair, never realizing that the girl they mocked daily was already stepping into destiny. The tables of life were preparing to turn, but they were too blind to see it. Amaka endured quietly, unaware that her greatest transformation was just around the corner. And so, while Auntie Ngozi and Evelyn celebrated what they thought was Amaka's downfall, fate was slowly weaving another story. Every insult they threw at her was preparing them for shame. Every sacrifice she made with Chaik was preparing her for honor. The wheelbarrow pusher they despised was not who they thought he was. In the silence of nights and the sweat of days, he was waiting for the right time. And when that time came, the truth would shine like the sun. The girl they mocked as house girl would rise higher than they could ever imagine. Watch out for part 2 of the story. Don't forget to subscribe to enjoy more interesting stories.